I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. And the angel looking over my shoulder is a childhood picture of my youngest Cassandra. Cassandra was as contrarian about coming out of the womb as everything else. And so when I had her, we could plan around it because she was 2 weeks late and we were going to induce. I made a red devil cake for the nurses and for the doctors, and later we joked that maybe it would have been better to make an angel cake. Cassandra is my social media advisor and always the one I want to complain to when I am driving people away in my comment threads, and that always especially hurts when they're women. Cassandra had an interesting point. She said you need two kinds of friends. You need some who are just living and loving their life. And then you need others who are together committed to facing up to the truth. And the reason is that second group is going to fight because they're passionate, they care. And that's why you need that first group, like my dancers, who you can go back to and just be superficial. I think that was really wise advice and something that we should be remembering as we're going through all the turmoil and differences. Is the reason that we're having these passionate discussions is because we all care. Today's topics are some of those controversies. I'm talking about Dodgy DOGE and Malone's MAHAm, and that's spelled capital MAHAM. But because many people are talking about these, along with the Trumpian tariffs, which I'll get into, I'm going to take a feminine view. What I'm going to talk about is how my plan would deal with those same goals as they're stated. And that way, I can bring in a feminine point of view. And that's why it's good to have my contrarian angel looking over my shoulder. I'll start with the Trump tariffs. These have the stated goal of attracting investment back into U.S. manufacturing. This is not going to work by agreement from economists on both sides of the aisle, but I'll put it in my own language. In my book, I talk about the unaffordable 4H: housing, healthcare, higher education, and hope for retirement. The reason these are always out of reach, no matter how much you make, is because they are bid competitively. It goes up as far as the market can bear. So the more money there is in circulation, the more is needed in order to achieve those. What balanced that out somewhat was the cheap EFG: energy, food, and goods. And the reason those didn't go up with the cost of living is because they were outsourced. So you could bring those in from elsewhere and it would balance out the fact that you couldn't afford the necessities of life and the services that you needed. In this case, what's going to happen is that the cheap EFG are going through the roof. And at the same time, the unaffordable 4H are going up also. So there's no reason that someone would be investing in U.S. manufacturing because we still have this sky-high cost of living. There's no way in which they can support people to be manufacturing at this level when we're trying to sell goods that are going to be cheaper than they would be to be imported even with the tariffs. The net result of this is suspiciously like the World Economic Forum's goal of you will own nothing and be happy if you can. Is this coordinated? Is this coming from above, a 4D, 5D chess that isn't bringing down the deep state, but is coming from the same people who run Israel, who are the deep state? Or is he simply, as he seems, Ralph the Wrecker, who is flying by the seat of his pants and devil take the hindmost? That question was somewhat answered for me in an unusual way reading an article by Ron Unz. In an article called President Donald Trump and Chairman Mao, Ron Unz writes, I was recently interviewed by a right-wing British podcaster named Mark Collette, and although the primary topic of our conversation was the JFK assassination, other issues did come up. He suggested that the personnel policies of the Trump administration reminded him of those followed by the Emperor Caligula, who might be so pleased at the wine-serving abilities of one of his slaves that he would immediately elevate the fellow to running an imperial province or commanding a large army, before growing dissatisfied with him a few days later and ordering his summary execution. And that made me realize I know exactly who Trump is, because I've worked for him. My first corporate job was for Borland International. At that time, it was 10 people above a garage, and it grew so rapidly that I started as a shipping clerk and got, I think, 7 promotions within the first 2 weeks, and eventually became their director of human resources. Philippe Kahn was the founder and the president, and Philippe was a wild card. He would come into my office and say, oh, this person, they're fantastic. I want you to give them a 50% raise. And by the time the raise came through on the payroll, he would be back again saying, fire them. He at one point said, yes, the night clerk for data entry, she's very smart. I think we need to put her in charge of this division. And I said, Philippe, that's going to look pretty strange. And he said, what are you saying? What are you implying about me? So there was one time that we acquired another company, and they were understandably nervous about their job security. So he gave a presentation and said, yes, and you can go anywhere. I recruited Teresa as a waitress, which was not technically true. And we have dozens of open positions, and I'm not just talking about the Kama Sutra. After undermining my credibility in that way, over lunch he privately told me, yes, and you need to lay off half of these people. Along with Director of Human Resources, I was also the trade show coordinator, and I threw the parties. A big event I threw was at a San Francisco trade show at the Galleria. It was a toga party. We sent invitations that were in scrolls written in verse, and we had things like the nymphs of Aphrodite, which were blow-up dolls that may have lost some of their clothes as they were being thrown from the balconies. We had the Trojan War, which was a balloon fight with condoms filled with shaving cream. We had, in particular, Philippe dressed as Nero and playing his saxophone, as close to Caligula as you can get. That party made the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but also nixed a deal by a conservative company that was about to acquire Borland. And I think when the stock went up, everyone owed me a cut. The gist of it is that Trump is Philippe Kahn. They are running on ego. If it's funny, they're going to say it no matter how offensive it is. And that success is what gives them the idea that they can do anything and be good at it. So that's not somebody who's telling them what to do, who actually has rhyme or reason figured out. And I think that is good news. As Trump fiddles while Rome burns, what is our plan? What my carrot system does is take the goal of cutting the unaffordable 4-H in half, and then in half again. And you can do that because you control that mechanism. Then you're also going to be increasing the cost of outside goods. So you're actually using tariffs or exchange rates in the same way. So as the dollar becomes less and less valuable and inflates through the roof, you are going to be able to keep your carrot system backed by your mortgages. And your mortgages will be that stimulus plan that backs local manufacturing and services. So that's how we're going to rebuild the Commonwealth after we let Rome burn. What about the Muskrat's Department of Government Efficiency? The purpose of that is to run the government as if it's a for-profit corporation, which begs the question, profits for whom? This is something that needs to be looked at because as they are pulling back all of those salaries from communities, and this is one of the only ways that money trickles into a community that is not for the purpose of extracting more than it puts in, because that's the concept of for-profit, right? You invest and you want to get more out. So our communities are being farmed where they're only putting money in as corporations in order to pull more out. Government jobs don't have that purpose. In this case, that's going to suck dry the local money in circulation and at the same time replace it with robo.gov. So the next time that you have an issue, let's say you can't figure out your tax statement or you want to figure out how to get social services, you're going to be stuck in one of those phone trees, or even worse, an online help robot. That is what our life is going to look like. Let's look at the upside. Before, those who were the most adamant in defending a federal government were the government employees, those who said, yes, we need this. They're supporting us. They're supporting the schools. Who's going to be in charge of the health system? Now, there are going to be no people left who are going to object if we say, let's take back our power. We don't need the federal government. And last, let's look at Malone's MAHAm. You may object and say, oh no, it's Kennedy in charge of Make America Healthy Again. No, it is not. Because I finally figured out why my video, the PSYOP Cyclops, was yanked after 2 years. It had nothing to do with that horse paste that shall not be named. No, it's because I referenced Malone's plan to dismantle the HHS. He had posted 2 different articles, I believe, where he went through how he could change the rules in order to clean house. And that reference was, I think, too close to the truth when they were getting ready to do that through Kennedy. So now I would say that Shmuley is Kennedy's handler for AIPAC, but Malone is Kennedy's handler for the CIA. They are working together, and this is what they always plan to do. As the suicide hotline ends up becoming a chatbot, how are we going to turn this to our advantage? I think that, like my favorite contrarian, the harder they push us in this direction, the more that it is backfiring, the more hungry people are for real connections. And I've even noticed lately that that depopulation agenda does not seem to be working. There were 3 adorable babies behind me in line at the grocery store and 2 women who are pregnant in my dance class. There are babies everywhere I look these days. So I think that the more they push us down, the more that we're recognizing what's really important in life, and we're going to come back stronger than ever. And for more, here is Trick or Trump, and this is Kennedy Straddles the Divide. And I have to say, I don't care what blackmail they have on him or if they are threatening to kill his kids. If he's willing to kill Palestinian babies in order to protect them, he is a craven coward. Don't trust in heroes. Trust yourself.